And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Tsimshian people. First elected in 2005, John previously served as Minister of Aboriginal Relations and Reconciliation and Minister of Forests, Lands, and Natural Resource Operations. He also previously served as the official opposition critic for Forest, Lands, and Natural Resource Operations. On today's Open Connection, MLA Nechako Lakes, John Rustad.
So I was first elected in my riding in 2005. So I've been in politics for a long time, serving with the BC Liberal Party. During that time, of course, I was Minister for Aboriginal Relations and Reconciliation for just over 4 years. I was also Minister of Forest, Lands, and Natural Resource Operations for a very short period of time. And so what's happened is the BC Liberal Party decided to kick me out of the party. And they did this because there was a policy paper that came out from the federal government called the Farm Emissions Reduction Strategy. And essentially what that means is they wanted to reduce the use of nitrogen-based fertilizer by 30% and reduce cattle herds by 30%. For some reason, they think, cattle's farting is going to change the weather. I don't know, but regardless of that, it would be devastating for my riding economically. So I had to speak out about this. And the leader of the BC Liberal Party, Kevin Falcon, gave me a call and said, look, you can't do that. You have to parrot our party line. You're not allowed to go out and do this. And I said to him, Kevin, respectfully, I was elected to represent my riding. I was elected to push issues that are important for my riding. This is an issue that I have to take on. He said, no, you have to make a choice. You either have to parrot the position or you can't be part of caucus. And I said, well, I'm sorry, I was elected by my riding, not by caucus. And so he said, okay, fine, hung up on me. And half an hour later, I was kicked out of the party. So from there, it became one of those, okay, what do you do? Right? I mean, this was August of 2022. Just so happened, actually, the funny thing is he would actually kick me out on my birthday. So I was kind of thinking, maybe this isn't a bad birthday present. See? Anyway, so after that, I explored what to do. I stayed as an independent for 6 months. And ultimately, I came to the decision that I wasn't happy with where things are going in the province. So I either had to just live with it or do something about changing it. So at that point, that's when I looked at the Conservative Party and thought, okay, here is an organization that has potential to become a new coalition party in this province. It has the potential to be able to fight for the things that, are important for me and is important for my riding. So I joined the party. A couple of weeks after joining the party, the current leader, or the previous leader, stepped down and became the interim leader, which then triggered a leadership race. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take this to go the full way. So I put my name in to become the leader of the party. And of course, just today, the announcement went out that I have now become the leader of the Conservative Party of BC. Obviously, I'm still elected for Nechako Lakes. I still have to do my job, right, which is represent my riding. And so that's what I did. But through that, I've realized that if I want to be able to implement larger change, then there's the best avenue for doing that was through a political party, which is where the Conservative Party of BC became the avenue that I think is a good option for people in British Columbia. When I really think about the Conservative Party, lots of people say, oh, it's right-wing politics or left-wing politics or Conservatives and Liberals and NDP. That's not what I want the party to be. I want the party to actually be a party for all British Columbians. And, as a true coalition party, to fighting more for what's right and wrong versus, the party politics. And like I say, it's going to be a lot of fun. The response so far has been very positive, and we'll see. It's a long way to go and a very short time to get there.
You were kind of responsible for signing a lot of agreements with, I guess now we're Indigenous. Before, at that time, I guess we were Aboriginal people.
My time as Minister for Aboriginal Relations and Reconciliation, I signed about 435 agreements across the province. And a lot of those agreements were around creating economic reconciliation. So I don't believe you can have true reconciliation and be able to move forward unless you can create an economic opportunity. Nations, I think, they want to be able to provide for the kids. They want to be able to provide for the people. They want to be able to have that engagement in the economy so that people can buy homes and, go on vacations and these types of things, right? Just like everybody else does. Not to mention, if we can do that, it's also good for non-Indigenous people because it's such a symbiotic relationship between the peoples. And so that's what a lot of these agreements were about, was engaging those economic opportunities. And I'm very proud of the work that we actually did in advancing reconciliation.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. As of April 3rd, 2023, BC Public Service employees will no longer be required to provide proof of vaccination against COVID-19. The decision to rescind the policy was based on the high level of vaccination among the public service employees in the current state of the pandemic. Let us return to the conversation as Rustad shares how some healthcare workers are not allowed to return to their profession.
There's about 7,000 healthcare workers that were either fired or were let go, or I should say left voluntarily or retired because of the mandates that were put in place. And at the time, COVID was an unknown. Everybody was worried, right? We talked about 3 or 4% mortality rate. It was absolutely horrendous. And so there was lots of panic that went on around this. And those decisions, should really be looked at so we can learn from them. But a hangover from that has been these mandates on healthcare, and that's our healthcare workers. And so British Columbia is facing a healthcare crisis. We don't have enough workers. We don't have enough nurses. We don't have enough doctors. And so it's really putting tremendous stress on patients, and patients are suffering because of it. We should really be looking at dropping those mandates and bringing back those healthcare workers. And the funny thing is, every other province in the country has done this. But for some reason, British Columbia has decided not to do it. And you really have to wonder, because there's actually a large number of nurses in particular that did not get a booster shot. So they've got the first and second shot, but they didn't get a third shot in terms of keeping it up to date. Well, after 2 years, the effects of those first two shots are basically nil. They're no different than people who are unvaccinated. And so why are we not hiring these people back, especially in the light of the crisis that we've got? It seems to be that it's more about politics than it is about, what patients need in this province. And so that's been something that I've been championing, there's a fight against Bill 36, and I've been working with healthcare workers across the province doing a petition, fighting this. I think we've got around 17,000 signatures now on this. We've been doing some town halls. We've been out, educating healthcare workers about the challenges of Bill 36. And it's been quite a task going around, but it's been very rewarding, just so that people become more and more aware of what's going on with our healthcare system and the ways, quite frankly, that we could be fighting to improve it.
Okay, tell me a little bit more about this Bill 36.
Sure. So what Bill 36 does is it actually rewrites or restructures how our healthcare colleges are done. So there's, somewhere between 15 and 24 different healthcare colleges in the province. Everything from doctors and nurses to chiropractors to sociopaths, to therapists, to dentists, right? To a wide range of people, naturopaths in the healthcare system. So what this does is it takes all of those and it brings it together into just 6 colleges. And then instead of having, for example, if you make a mistake as a doctor or as a nurse, it needs to be reviewed, and it should be reviewed by your peers, by doctors and nurses, right? In terms of what would the situation, would you do that? Well, this takes that away, and it's actually the government is talking about putting lawyers in those positions, and so it doesn't make any sense to do that. It creates a pretty negative environment. In addition to that, it will take the mandates on COVID and actually extend them to healthcare workers that are not currently covered, like dentists or like chiropractors. And so this is creating a big challenge. And the worst part of all of this is the healthcare workers themselves don't even know this is happening because there hasn't been any engagement. So they aren't aware of the changes being put in. And one of the other pieces in associated with this act, which is, it's kind of odd, but as a doctor, you've gone through a lot of years of training, you've got a lot of years of experience, and when a patient comes in, you know the patient, you work through the health issues, and you make a recommendation to them. And that may be maybe because of your situation, you shouldn't get vaccinated or whatever the case may be. Well, if a doctor actually comes out and says something that is not in line with the mandates and what has come down from the government, that doctor could actually face a $200,000 fine and 6 months in jail. And so it's a pretty dramatic change to how we expect healthcare to be delivered in this province. And like I say, that is being done without the engagement with the healthcare professionals. So the petition's about to put this on hold, kill the bill, but it is not completely enacted yet because they still have to do regulations. And so my hope is it'll put pressure on government to actually go out and do that work, engage with the healthcare professionals across the province, let people know really what's going on. And then if there is the pushback that I believe there really should be, let's sit down and actually write something that makes sense and works.
Are other provinces doing a similar thing where they have like a college or lawyers to oversee them?
So, I mean, all the provinces have colleges for each of the health professions. I'm not sure if they've all done the work that they've done here and bringing them all together into just 6 colleges. But all the other, historically, all the colleges have had health professionals as the governing body of the health profession. So doctors for doctors, nurses for nurses, chiropractors for chiropractors, et cetera. And they may have a lawyer on the board to provide them with advice. But when it comes down to it, it's not being driven by the lawyers, it's being driven by the health professionals.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. Effective February 23, 2022, zero-emission vehicles are exempt from PST. This includes fully electric vehicles, hybrid plug-in vehicles, and hydrogen-powered vehicles sold by dealerships and by private sellers. Let us return the conversation as Rustad shares how some vehicles can use the HOV lanes even though they do not meet the minimum number of occupants.
So government is to be providing these subsidies for electric vehicle purchases and electric bikes. And I'll talk about those in a minute. But one of the other things that, and as an incentive for people to buy an electric vehicle, is you could have the privilege of using these HOV lanes. You get a little sticker and it allows you to use these HOV lanes without having high occupancy. And so you think about it, majority of people, the average person in this province can't afford to buy an electric vehicle. They're expensive. And so what we're talking about is we're taking taxpayers' dollars from people that can't afford an electric vehicle to subsidize the purchase of an electric vehicle by somebody that can afford it, and then to give them the privilege to use an HOV lane. And I just think, that is just wrong. We shouldn't be doing that, right? HOV lanes are important for trying to, encourage people to use single vehicles, not multiple vehicles, to help reduce the traffic and these things. But furthermore, when you think about these subsidies, government is taking taxpayers' money to support the purchase of this, but 80% of the electric batteries that are used, the lithium batteries are used, use cobalt that comes from the Congo. And I really recommend to people to read a book called Cobalt Red. But when you read it, make sure you got some Kleenex on hand, because it is just tragic. When you read about the conditions that children as young as 6-year-olds are working in, mothers with their babies strapped to their back, working, trying to dig up this cobalt, this material. It's a toxic, dirty environment, and they're working in this for as little as $1 or $2 a day. And that's the difference between whether they have food on their plate that day or not. And it's hard, long days. It's brutal conditions. If this was happening in British Columbia, it'd be shut down tomorrow. Like, we just wouldn't accept this to happen. So how is it that we are okay with putting people through that kind of lifestyle, destroying their environment so that we're trying to improve our environment? It just doesn't make sense. And, people have to make their own individual choices, but I just think it's wrong that government should be using taxpayers' money to subsidize this kind of an activity that's happening on the Congo. I think we should make a statement and stop these subsidies.
are those at a cost? Are those free for these electric vehicles? Do you know?
When these things were originally set up, they were set up free. Now, I think you have to put a credit card now to it, and so there is a charge associated with charging your vehicle. But that's an interesting thing. Living up in the north, we're used to going long distances, right? My riding's 280 kilometers to go across. I can't get back and forth across my riding with an electric vehicle. Even one of those vehicles that have long range, because as soon as you turn your heater on, you significantly reduce how much range you've got, right? In winter, you're not going to be driving without a heater. It's just the way it is, right? And so you're driving across the riding, and then if you can find one of these high-speed chargers, at a minimum, you're waiting half an hour to get a charge. And if it's not one of the high-speed ones, you're waiting hours. And it was interesting, there was a lot of people, because there's getting to be more and more people with these electric vehicles. Last summer, of course, a bunch of people went up to the Okanagan, and on the way back, they stopped in Hope to get charged. Well, people were waiting, 3 or 4 hours to get their turn to get a little charge on their vehicle so that they can make it the rest of the way. We need to be able to have more infrastructure in place for people that want that. But at the same time, is this really what we want, society? I mean, it's a challenge, I think, for many people.
Now, John, one of the things I heard you mention a couple times was something called direct democracy. Could you tell me about that?
Sure. So when you think about what we do today in our democracy, our representative style democracy, right? We vote once every 4 years, and of course, unless there's a by-election or a minority government, might be sooner. But we vote once every 4 years, and we vote in a government. And then government basically gets to do whatever they want, and there's no check back with the public. And so what I'm thinking out in particular is we see taxes go up every single year. It doesn't matter if it's the Liberal government or the NDP government, taxes are always going up. And I think, quite frankly, people are taxed enough. And so I think for governments in the future to go forward, if they want to have a tax increase or if they want to introduce a new tax, they should do it by referendum. They should go to the people and ask their permission to raise taxes, to ask them if this is what they want or their government to do. And because I think, quite frankly, taxes are already high enough. We don't need any more taxes in this province. And so it's a way to be able to make sure that people have a say, and also as a way to put a check on government so that governments can be more responsive and more accountable to the voting public.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
During a question period on Monday, April 17th, Conservative Party MLA John Rustad was a lone no voting against BC NDP's motion denouncing the Freedom Convoy and affirming BC's response to COVID-19 pandemic. In this final segment of Open Connection, Rustad shares how he best represents his riding.
I get this question all the time about, if you're starting a new party, well, the Conservative Party's been around a long time, obviously, but obviously they haven't been running a lot of candidates. Isn't that just going to split the vote? And for the people that want the center-right side of the equation. And I just look at it and think, is it, the inherent right, God-given right, that one party should be the only party that could form a government, other than the NDP in this province? And you look at back in the 40s, the Liberals became arrogant, they had all kinds of problems, and the Social Credit Party started up, and it replaced the Liberal Party. And then the Social Credit Party, of course, fell apart, and the NDP came in and governed, and during that time, the Liberals and the Reform Party and the PPA, they all kind of fought to find out who would come out of it, and finally the Liberals came out on top as the new coalition party. Well, they've run their course. They've got all kinds of baggage. There's a certain level of arrogance, I think, that has crept into what they're doing, and they've really lost their coalition. And so it's time to build that new coalition that is going to be, the governing party, or the party that has the potential to govern in this province for the next generation. And I think that's what the Conservative Party can be. So that's why I've joined that party, and I've looked forward to, going out and fighting for representatives that can actually have their voice for their riding. That is what they're elected to do. That's their primary goal. So you want strong, independent people that can fight for their riding, but can come together as that coalition to be able to provide a governing option. So that's my hope for the Conservative Party. And of course, there's lots of policies and things that we'll bring forward over time. But in general, I think that's what people are looking for in this province, and I hope to be able to deliver that for them.
Yeah, because you got to this position because you refused to. You wanted the best for your constituency. They asked you to do something, and you go, okay, you give me that trust to do it. I'm going to be there and fight for you. So this sounds like that. This isn't just a casual thing for you, that you are going to do what you need to do for your constituency. Is that right?
That's correct. And whether you look at the NDP or you look at the BC Liberals, the funny thing is when you go into the election, they're all saying the same thing. The NDP members are all saying with the NDP lines, the BC Liberals are all saying the BC Liberal lines. And so is that what you want as a representative, somebody that's just going to parrot the party lines? Or do you want somebody that knows your riding, that's going to fight for your riding, and recognizing that we are going to have 93 ridings in the next election, and they're all going to be different. They all have different issues. And so you want people that are going to be able to be free to fight for their beliefs and what they want to do in terms of representing their riding, but being able to work together as a party. And that is a challenge, but that's leadership. Leadership is about being able to bring those different opinions and different perspectives together to move forward in a direction, not to just, to whip everybody into a position where they can only say one thing because the leader's position is the only position that anybody will take. April 1st is traditionally April Fool's Day, and where people like to play jokes. But here we have a province of British Columbia playing a very nasty joke on the people of this province. They're increasing the carbon tax by 30%. It's going from $50 a ton to $65 a ton. And people say, well, it's just a few pennies a liter. The reality is they collect $2.5 billion today, and tomorrow on carbon tax, they will be going up by $750 million. People are struggling to put food on the table. They're struggling to be able to pay for the gas in their tanks. And this is just a huge tax grab that's going on by this government to be introduced tomorrow. I personally, this has got to stop. These tax increases like this has to stop. People cannot afford this type of an increase in our basic needs, which is energy and food.
And John, is there anything I might have missed that you'd like to add?
We have a lot of things that are going on in this province. Like there's a lot of things, people just, can sense that something's not quite right. And whether it be, our vulnerability to supply chains, we've seen our grocery shelves, sometimes have challenges. Whether it's, our energy and our energy costs, people are struggling to put food on the table. And I actually think government should be really focused on that, on our quality of life. Because if you can't provide for your family, you're certainly not going to be interested in doing the right thing in terms of the environment. So we really need to be thinking about the policies we're putting in place that are going to put people at the center. And quite frankly, have people, that are representing that are going to be fighting for those rights, fighting for the people in British Columbia.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.